In 1992, feminist author Gloria Steinem claimed in her book Revolution from Within that in the United States alone, around 150,000 women died from anorexia every year. To put that in perspective, this would have been 3 times the number of people killed in car accidents, or more than twice the number of Americans killed in the Vietnam War, annually. This figure was cited by another feminist icon, Naomi Wolf, who compared deaths from anorexia in the US to the Holocaust and suggested that these women were starved not by nature, but by men. It's a shocking statistic, but there's just one problem. According to the US National Center for Health Statistics, the actual number of deaths from anorexia each year in the US at the time was fewer than 100. Let that sink in. Not less than 100,000, less than 100 individuals. And yet this figure, completely detached from reality, continued to circulate, unchecked, in the media for years, even making its way into college textbooks. This raises a question that is as obvious as it is unsettling. How could something so demonstrably false, so fundamentally out of alignment with reality and people's experience of the world, be published in the first place, let alone repeated, disseminated, and used in textbooks? How could so many supposedly educated people believe something that was so self evidently untrue? If such a Holocaust were occurring within the United States in the early 1990s, one would imagine that the average person would probably have noticed that anorexia was killing more women annually than wars and car accidents combined. And yet, as spectacular and well documented as this historical example is, it pales in comparison to the scale of the Orwellian gaslighting that citizens of countries like the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia are now forced to endure on a daily basis. Take racism and sexism. We're told they are taboo, yet we are now divided, categorised, and judged by race and gender more than at any other time in the last 50 years. Initiatives like diversity, equity, and inclusion assume that race is essential to who we are, rather than incidental. You can be cancelled for making a supposedly racist or sexist comment, yet phrases like typical white male are perfectly acceptable. The logic of DEI assumes that people who share a skin colour all think alike, which is, quite literally, the definition of racism. We're expected to believe that the privileges enjoyed by a minute percentage of hyper successful men somehow apply to poor, working class, and middle class men everywhere. Meanwhile, middle and upper class women are said to be disadvantaged by comparison, an argument that collapses the moment it's held up to the light. We now inhabit a moral landscape where victims are viewed as perpetrators and perpetrators as victims, where hate speech seems to mean any comment that is out of alignment with radical leftist woke ideology, where you can label someone a fascist or a Nazi without presenting a shred of evidence in support of your claim and not be held to any kind of account, where entire groups are branded as privileged regardless of the individual circumstances of members of that group. Even once reliable scientific, academic, and media institutions have been infiltrated by an ideological agenda, leaving us psychologically unanchored with no solid points of reference for truth. We're told that if you believe that your country's borders should be controlled, you're a member of the far right. If you believe beauty is not simply a social construct, you're perpetuating unhealthy, oppressive beliefs. If you believe your culture and traditions are worth preserving, you're labelled a racist. And if you question the idea that diversity, rather than unity, equals strength, you're engaged in some sort of heresy. But perhaps most disturbing of all is the moral inversion, the depiction of good as bad and bad as good. The recognition of a Palestinian state by many Western countries, in the wake of the massacre of more than 1,200 Israeli civilians, the creation of GoFundMe pages for violent offenders, and the celebration of drag queen story time where grown men in highly sexualized women's clothing read stories to children, are indicative of a world where truth and morality are being turned upside down. How did we get here? How did we reach the point where people are being gaslit on a daily basis, where down is up, wrong is right, and bad is good? How can so many people continue to believe things that are so obviously and demonstrably untrue? And how can we manage to stay psychologically grounded in the face of the ongoing woke ideological onslaught? With regard to the first of these questions, how we got here, a large part of the answer lies in institutional capture, the process by which a relatively small group of ideological zealots have infiltrated and now dominate many of our major institutions, such as the media, schools, public services, and corporations. For a brilliant and detailed exposition of how a set of ideas once confined to university humanities and social science departments have sallied forth to colonize society's key institutions, I recommend Christopher Rufo's excellent book, America's Cultural Revolution: How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. Rufo maps out precisely how an ideology once confined to the fringes has spread like wildfire through education, journalism, and government policy. A slow but deliberate neo Marxist ideological contamination that has wrangled its way into our institutional organs and cultural bloodstream. The second question is perhaps even more intriguing. How can so many people, even intelligent people, believe things that are so strikingly, obviously, and demonstrably out of alignment with reality? Part of the answer lies in the psychological power of ideology itself. Once adopted, rigid adherence to a belief system can literally blind people to reality. It renders them ideologically blinkered, unable to see what's right in front of them. As former KGB propagandist Yuri Bezmenov, who was tasked with the ideological subversion of Western countries during the Cold War, once explained, for the person who is brainwashed, exposure to true information doesn't matter, as that person is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with the authentic truth, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him the concentration camps, he will refuse to believe it. When a military boot crushes his balls, then he will understand, but not before. Interestingly, this kind of brainwashing has two effects. It creates an inability to perceive reality as it is, and it gives rise to the ability to see things that aren't really there. Which brings us to the third and perhaps most important question. Under the circumstances described in this video, and in the face of deliberate gaslighting by individuals and once trusted institutions, how can one remain sane in a society that seems to have lost its mind? How can one psychologically survive the woke ideological onslaught? Here's my deceptively simple but powerful recommendation. Trust your own experience, not the ideologically motivated reporting of mainstream media or the institutional narratives which insist that your privilege and naivete are blinding you to the discrimination, oppression, and exploitation that are supposedly all around you. You are not suffering from false consciousness. You're very likely seeing the world and experiencing reality as it actually is. Psychologically grounding yourself in what you've actually seen, felt, and lived is one of the most reliable compasses you have in a world distorted by ideology. It should go without saying that this doesn't mean rejecting evidence or logic, or believing that anything you haven't personally experienced is false. Far from it. It means using reality as you've actually experienced it as your primary psychological anchor. This is important because a conscious commitment to maintaining trust in one's own experience can act as a psychological shield, a buffer against the doubts that can so easily arise in response to the ceaseless insistence that down is up, bad is good, wrong is right, and that your society and values are rotten to the core. How do you cope, personally and psychologically, with the woke ideological onslaught? Please let me know in the comments, and if you'd like to jointly explore more of these sorts of topics and see channels like this grow, please share and subscribe.